After spending half of her life performing in Europe, an opera singer trades her musical career for a life of serenity in Santa Fe. The story of the garden and the gardener, next on A Gardener's Diary.
Found a garden in Santa Fe that was hiding behind huge adobe walls. It belongs to Jenna Browning and her husband Joe Illick, two musicians who have traveled the world. Joe, who began his career as a concert pianist, is currently the music director for the Fort Worth Opera, and Jenna has retired from the opera to become a full-time mom to her son Eric. Although her garden is only 2 years old, it already has its own personality, which blends art, poetry, and of course, music into a magical combination. No wonder they call their place the House of Dreams.
There's music in the garden if you're quiet enough to hear it. And that to me is the music of the soul. You're surrounded by the living things doing what they do, unfolding, unfurling, bursting out.
This is your front garden that we're entering.
This is the front garden. It's called Riverdance. And we call it Riverdance because there's a sculpture, and the sculpture is named Riverdance. So this is one of my favorite gardens that I have because of the big pond and because of this archway right here. This is an archway that I found. It's a woven willow archway. And it's a very important focus of this garden because from this room where I practice, you look out this window through this archway and have this vista that is so beautiful. And I sing my parts there and practice them. I look in this garden. I look at it when I'm singing, when I'm practicing from the living room. And because our house has a little L curve there, I also see it from the bedroom. So we have these two vistas. So when we saw this space that was this horrible little grassy area with a dead tree in it, I thought it needs birds, it needs insects, it needs structure, it needs the sound of water, it needs beautiful vertical plants and wide bushy plants and color. And then in the center of it, there's a piece of selenite, and in the middle of winter with the snow all around it, I see this translucent selenite with the light flowing through it, and that becomes a real organic living entity as well.
You have the wonderful walls. The colors you've selected really are set off by the color of the adobe.
I love the walls. It makes everything look like it belongs. It's part of the earth. It's very soft and gentle and organic. And then you have these brilliant flowers that come out, the blaze,
this rose,
the yarrow.
Blaze, that's it. And that is a rose that does well for you in Santa Fe. How cold does it get here in the winter?
We have a real winter. It gets down past 0, sometimes -10, but mostly around 0. And the blaze, this is a great rose in Santa Fe. You see it everywhere. This rose has been in for 1 year.
Wow.
Look how big it is already.
And how do you treat it? I mean, in terms of, do you mulch it heavily before?
I mulch it very heavily. I mulch it up to about here in the winter. And I use an organic fertilizer, and I think that's what gives it its power and its strength. And then we just let it go.
Some gardeners keep their garden off limits to children and pets. But Jenna's is a fantasy world where every garden has something for kids to enjoy.
I have a darling little boy who's 7 named Eric. And part of every garden belongs to my son. There is the climbing structure or a tree house, a pergola, a wall. So each garden has something like that.
And this tree house, does he actually get up inside of it?
Oh yes, this is his tree house. And what I've done for him is woven all the honeysuckle around so that when I'm looking out the window, he can see me through the honeysuckle, but I can't see him.
It's a child-friendly garden.
It's a child-friendly garden. And the garden is named after this fabulous sculpture. We were at Shadoni with about 8 children. Yes, it moves. It's a swing. You can actually ride on this swing. It's not so comfortable for an adult, but what the kids do is they go around and around. I can't do it. I'm too big. And then it goes around that way as well. So we can have 4 kids on here, and the thing turns around like that, And it's all found materials. So this garden with the tree house and the sculpture and the piece of selenite that's back there, in the winter becomes this magical paradise.
And I love that you have added back in the native aspens. It has a real sense of place. We know we're in Santa Fe, even though you've got lots of wonderful perennials blooming, you still have...
It's true, and when the wind goes through the aspens, I don't know if you've noticed this.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it sounds like water. So yes, I love the aspens. And this is the only garden that's cool enough. It's on the north side. So it's the only garden where we could have aspens. I would have them everywhere.
Coming up, what's an elephant from India doing on an adobe wall in Santa Fe?
Touring Jenna Browning's Santa Fe garden, I almost got lost in the maze of adobe walls that separate her 6 garden areas. Besides the Riverdance garden, there's a potager full of vegetables and an orchard of grapes, apples, and pears. Another garden reflects Jenna and Joe's love of India. An artist is at work in the main garden, carving the remains of a dead tree into another artistic focal point. The moon garden, the driveway garden, the dry garden, it seemed endless. With such an intense summer heat in Santa Fe, you have a short growing season, and then you have a pretty cold winter. Gets down to the teens.
That's exactly right. It gets down to the teens.
Sometimes it's a challenge to find plants, but yarrows, especially these gray-green foliage plants, seem to love this climate.
They bloom all the way until the frost. So this plant will begin blooming in June. I have it through until the frost.
You can't ask for more than that.
I think it's a fabulous plant. This and Russian sage are probably my 2 favorite plants in the garden.
The soft yellow is such a great color out here in this intense heat, but even the deeper, more sulfur, wouldn't you say, yellow?
More sulfur, the big coronation gold. These were planted in the fall. By next year, they will be huge. They become gargantuan out here. And they take the drought like no plant.
And do you ever cut them for drying?
I leave them in the garden. I do not cut my flowers.
Well,
it's too hard to keep them here.
And the lilies, and this looks like Lavatera Barnsley.
That is Lavatera Barnsley.
Such a pretty soft pink.
And I think it works really well with the yellow, that very hearty yellow, to have a softer, more gentle color behind it.
So you have to do some experimenting to find out what's going to survive in your climate.
I have lost probably half of what I put in.
Wow.
Probably half. But now in this garden particularly, there are more natives in this garden than in any of the other gardens. I learned from my mistakes.
And if they're not natives, they're at least adapted like the yarrows.
They're adapted, yes.
Is that, Jenna, is that real?
Yes, it is. That's a fabulous dragonfly.
Wow.
When we moved into this property, it was completely dead. There were no insects, there were no birds. So we put the 2 ponds in and we brought back insects, birds. We have a colony of bees that comes to the small pond to drink the water. Fish.
If you build it, they will come.
If you build it, they will come. It is true. The garden for me is a place of contemplation, of great beauty and silence in the middle of the music of the garden, the birds, the insects. That's what life is. It's one cycle after another. It's not just in the garden, it's in the deeper areas of my life. It's in the family. My child gets older, a new stage. I'm in a new stage. I move from my career as a singer to my career as a mom. And I feel the garden supports me and holds me.
Jenna, I love garden swings, but I've never seen one like this. This is very unusual and obviously from another country.
Yes, this is a swing from Rajasthan in India. Joe and I love to go to India. We've been there a number of times, and I feel like the energy of India and the energy of Santa Fe have some similarities. I love the ornateness of the swing. We created this entire area of the garden around the swing, making the path so it arrived at the swing. I wanted to have a mosaic put in. A friend of mine called me and said she knew this artist whom I went down to see, and I said, Lori, I love Rajasthan. Can you do something that can relate to this swing? So she came over and began showing me drawings of what she thought would work, and I just said, you're the artist. I think she did a magnificent
She did. You've got
piece
this
of work that works so well with the swing. It has the feeling of Rajasthan. This is a day scene with the sun and the elephant, and the other side will have the tree going over the archway, and it will be a night scene with a phoenix.
Wow.
Isn't it magical? And it makes this garden very magical too, because this garden's a shady garden, and I'm not able to grow lots and lots of colorful flowers in here.
So you bring the color in with the mosaic.
So we bring the color in with the mosaic.
And you have this wonderful sign over the door. We are the music makers. We are the dreamers of dreams.
Yes, this is from a poem by O'Shaughnessy that spoke very deeply to us. I feel like this describes Joe and myself to a T. We are musicians, and the music that we make is part of our dreams. And then on the door, I also have a little rain being, because as you know, we've been in a horrible drought for a long, long time, for 5 years now.
It hasn't started working yet.
It works occasionally. I put it out and then it rains. I think it's working. I think it's bringing the rain. I feel the rain coming.
You feel it coming.
I hope I do.
But you do have a spectacular delphinium.
I do, and I love delphiniums.
And those delphiniums are perennial for you here in Santa Fe?
They are perennial for us here in Santa Fe.
Those look like the Pacific giants.
This is the Pacific giant. Yes, it is. This is, I believe, King Arthur, but I am not completely sure about that.
That sounds right, King Arthur.
King Arthur.
Well, that's a wonderful burst of color to have in here.
Isn't it great? You have all this green where nothing's blooming, and then va-boom, the spectacular delphinium. I love that flower.
What lurks behind the garden wall and holds the secret ingredient to Jenna and Joe's colorful flowers? Stay with us.
I knew that Santa Fe had been having a drought, but you would never know it once you entered Jenna Browning's lush garden. The sound of water is everywhere. On these hot days, you're probably really glad you have these ponds around. They're not necessarily large, but so cooling, just the hearing the sound of the water.
It is cooling, and it's nice to have water in the garden, both the sound and the humidity.
But it's all recirculating, so
It's
you're
all
not,
recirculating.
it's just water that's here
It's
and you recirculate.
recirculating. And I fill it with water that I collect in a rain barrel and then fill into the pond. So when we get rain, the rain barrel fills up and I fill up the pond with that. The drought plays a really big role in my garden and in every garden in Santa Fe. We've been in a serious drought for 5 years. We decided we would put in a massive water containment system. We have the capacity now to harvest and store 12,000 gallons of water. We have 7 gargantuan tanks. We have a pump system that pumps it from the driveway, from the basketball court. The roofs, all the canales all drain into something or actually have a pipe that leads underground. And all this water is taken over to the containment system.
On either side of me, I'm surrounded by these wonderful, this climbing rose and this weeping larch. I have to touch it because it's
It's tactile.
That's a
something to
gorgeous
look at. Oh,
rose.
it's a beautiful rose. It's been in for 2 years. I bought it as a shrub. They told me it was a shrub America, and then it began climbing. So I took it.
So it's a climbing America.
It's a climbing America.
Is it a repeat bloomer?
It's a repeat bloomer, and it's a very heavy repeat bloomer. I will get exactly this much. It will grow quite a bit more this summer, if last summer was any indication.
Your foliage is really clean, and a lot of roses, to keep them looking this way, you have to spray them with all kinds of things.
I don't spray these roses. If I have aphids, I use an insecticidal soap.
And I can see it's got a lot of canes at the base, so it's been here a while.
Yes, it's been in for 2 full years.
2 years.
And it's very happy here. Obviously, this is a great spot. It likes the water, too. Oh, my husband, Joe, is incredible. Every single plant in my garden, with the exception of one area, has irrigation on it, a tiny little emitter. Joe laid every single piece of that. So he's now bonded to the garden. He has a personal interest. If a plant starts wilting, he says, oh, it might be the irrigation. Let me check the irrigation. So now we have this fantastic partnership in the garden. I do the planting and the designing. He makes sure it stays alive. Can't have one without the other.
This is the moon garden, and you have, I guess, plants planted that will look good in the evening.
All the plants in here bloom white. It's a very cool garden in the summer. When the heat strikes, we have these beautiful white plants, and I come in here and I sit on the bench and feel very cool.
Even though we're not standing in burning sun at the moment, this is a very hot spot.
This is one of the hottest spots in the entire garden.
And most of your garden is in full sun. So you really have tried all the plants that'll take the drought in the Southwest and the full sun. Angora is a great plant. That's a I believe it's a Texas native.
This is a Texas native, and it's a perennial that increases every year. So you start with your little tiny plant, and every year it gets more and more and more. I expect in 2 or 3 years this will fill in entirely.
And I grow it in Atlanta, and it's completely happy with the humidity. So it tolerates the dry air and the humidity. And this cultivar is
Whirling butterflies.
Whirling butterflies.
Whirling butterflies. Once it starts blooming, this plant blooms until the frost cuts it off in about October.
And that lavender is spectacular when it comes into bloom, even when it's not in bloom.
It is. It's very beautiful. It blooms white. Once it blooms, it will stay blooming again all through the season. So there's a white hedge around that bench.
Although most of Jenna's garden is irrigated, there is one garden where the plants have to fend for themselves. This area, you've got yarrow, which is a drought-tolerant plant, and
we have gigantic lavender, the grosso back there as well.
It's not all in bud right now.
Yes, it's all in bud right now. And the catmint, another drought-tolerant plant.
That's Six Hills Giant.
Six Hills Giant, and that's important. The drought-tolerant piece is important because we do not have any water on any of these plants back here, except for the fruit trees. So this is a complete drought type garden, and it does work. You can see it blooms beautifully.
And these are all perennials.
They're all
so
perennials.
Everything comes back.
They've all been in for about a year, so by next year it will fill out quite a bit more and be much more lush and full. Lush in our sense.
What about the cowboy with the bird feeder up here?
This is Pinocchio.
Oh, Pinocchio. I thought it was a cowboy.
Yes. No, it's Pinocchio. A friend of mine who knows my love of unusual artifacts brought it while I was in Paris at one point and just plopped it there and put a bird feeder on it.
This is his nose.
That's his nose, and waited until I noticed it. And I just love it. It's so whimsical and so wonderful. The birds perch on it, the bird feeders on it. It gives a touch of whimsy, I think.
Next, the old well is not the only deep subject in the driveway garden. Jenna explains it all with a song.
When Jenna Browning retired from her career as an opera singer to devote her time to her family, a creative void was filled by gardening. After spending time there, I realized that she'd achieved her vision of creating a peaceful and spiritual place where she could combine her love of art and music, even in the middle of her driveway. We're standing in what feels like the middle of your driveway.
That's right. This is the middle of the driveway, the middle of the property. When we moved into this property, there was nothing here except in this circle, which was a tangled mass of plants and thorn bushes. You couldn't see anything in here, and a 25-foot well. We stumbled on it literally. One of Joe's feet went in, and we pulled back, and there's this well. And yet, to have a well is such a beautiful thing. It made me think of the Grail legend, which also is a legend of a cauldron, of a cup. And that is what made me think to do this garden. It inspired me for the entire garden.
And what is written on this rock? Is that part of the...
And this stone, on this side is an English text, Luli, Lule, the falcon hath borne my make away. It's a text that refers to the Grail, and it's a song. I'm going to sing you the little song. It goes, Luli, Lule, Luli, Lule, the falcon hath borne my make away. And it's a song I've sung.
Wow.
It's
I've never had
beautiful
anyone
song.
sing to me like that.
Well, music in the garden, music in the garden. So I have this as a marker before you walk into the place of contemplation, the circle, the center of the world, the globe that reflects the sky and the plants.
And the Caryopteris surrounds it.
It surrounds us, and actually the Blumis spirea creates a hedge by midsummer, so you feel like, even though you're in the middle of my driveway, which is not a pretty place, you're in this private, beautiful enclave where you can maybe find a piece of yourself that in the hectic bustle of the day you couldn't find in another place. Music and gardening and art, to me, are all related. It's all interwoven. It's all the same. It's all part of the life process, the beauty of living, of joy, of growing and expanding, and then the decay, and then the next cycle. So I'm able to really be with the cycles and live those cycles through my garden, through my music.